Okay. They don't sound very loud. I don't know. Can you guys hear the mics okay? Okay. Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. We are here in the Freeport High School Library. We have a full board, so we will get right to it, and starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the January 22nd, 2025 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Kara and Maura, thank you. All those in favor? Great. None opposed. Adjustments to the agenda.
This evening, I'd like to adjust 8A, which are resignations. I have 3 additional resignations to announce, and that is all this evening.
All right. Moving right along to item 6, good news and recognition. We will look to Moon to provide us an update.
A lot of stuff has happened, over, I guess, the past couple of weeks. I guess so far the boys basketball team won against Mount Ararat. I think of yesterday and won, so that was a good win, but their season has been cut short. But then also the Freeport leadership team has finished gathering information about our main topic of school culture and what it's like, what it's about, and we'll eventually address that to the school board and also the student body. Furthermore, we're also apparently planning for the spring dance, and we're also gathering music ideas and songs that we're possibly going to play. And also, the seniors had an auction to raise money for the prom and more stuff like that. And I guess it ends February 9th, so if anyone wants to auction for anything, that's something. Also, we just had a curriculum fair, so that was the whole school did. I think of last week, I'm pretty sure, and that was a pretty cool experience, is to see the new classes that RSU 5 and Region 10 are offering. So it was a good experience. And also recently we had the 8th grade school night, which was pretty good, I heard. And so it's going to be great to see, I guess, the new freshmen coming up. And then also the school also started sharing advertising, school trips that we can do over the summer vacation. For example, the free outward bound trip for Freeport students, which was a trip where students could, I guess, visit the shoreline and just rock climb, sail, and ski sail for 5 days. So that sounds cool. And also the Youth Maine Wilderness Leadership Program, which is a program where you can just, sophomores and juniors can go to Baxter and learn leadership skills and just hike around and explore the wilderness. And lastly, the Scholastics Art and Writing Awards, which was an annual competition. A lot of our Freeport students won a lot of awards. For example, Marsden Shaderly won gold in 2 of his art pieces. Then Jane Schultz won 2 golden tours in her arts. And yeah, it's a lot of, I think about 15, 20 students who got at least honorable mention or gold. So that's pretty good. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Moon. All right. So we will move on to item 7, public comment. Usually I do a brief pause because there's no one in the audience. I do feel like we probably have some public comment tonight, so I will just start with what we ask of folks who'd like to speak. We ask that you come up to the microphone, you give us your name and where you live, and you have 3 minutes. We'll have a little timer so you'll know when that 3 minutes is up. And we ask if there's multiple folks who'd like to speak, if you can queue up behind the speaker so we can keep it moving quickly so we can hear from as many folks as we can. Oh, yes. And Cynthia, I don't even know where she is. Okay, Cynthia, did you do a sign-in sheet? Oh, did people, okay. Is that what we're going off of?
We have 5 names on there.
Okay. So, you going to give it to me? That would have been really impressive. Just paper airplane that right up here. While it's on its way up here, if anyone else would like to add their name to it, grab there on their way by. Thank you. Okay. Stephanie. There's only one Stephanie, so there we go.
Yeah. Good evening. How are you?
Very well.
All right. Does that work? Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Stephanie Luton Casares, and I live in Freeport with my family. I'm the mother of a student in Mrs. Island class, and I also have a son who benefited from a multilingual program previously known as ESL or ESOL. So as a result, I have a good understanding of these programs and their teachers and how students benefit from them. For my children, English is their third language. They speak French and Spanish fluently. Coming from another country and trying to adapt, the multilingual program has been a blessing for them and for our entire family. It's not only English used in various subjects, math, English class, science, etc., but also when the student has difficulties reading, with all its layers of nuances, difficulties of understanding or expressing oneself. And the program goes much deeper. It involves understanding different social codes, traditions, customs, as well as learning how to navigate a new environment. Most importantly, it is about feeling welcomed as a human being and knowing that it is okay to learn a new language and culture without having to erase the one you grew up with. Miss Island excels in this regard. She tailors her class to accommodate each student's learning style and needs. She approaches her work with empathy, compassion, and genuine curiosity, embracing everyone's differences. Over time, students come to realize that these differences are indeed a strength, and they have a lot to contribute. Multilingual programs are a powerful asset in a school, in any school. And Miss Island is a tremendous asset to Freeport High School. She's highly valued, experienced, appreciated by her peers, and deeply loved by her student. Any school and any student would be very fortunate to have her on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Liz already knew she was next.
Good evening, RSU5 board members and community. My name is Liz Pierce, and I am one of 3 school counselors at Freeport High School. As the counselor who has worked closest with our multilingual students, I am here to advocate on behalf of keeping the 3rd ESOL district position so we can continue to provide a full-time multilingual learner program at the high school. We are projected to have 15 multilingual students next year, with an unknown number of additional enrollments. Just in the last few months, we have had 2 new multilingual students join us from other countries. A full-time, well-structured multilingual program like the one we currently have is not just beneficial, it is a necessity for the success of our students. There are legal and equity considerations for maintaining a full-time program. Under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974, public schools must ensure multilingual students have equal and meaningful access to education and grade-level curriculum. Please consider the unique challenges at the high school level. The academic language demands are more complex. Students are required to comprehend high-level lectures, participate in discussions, complete assignments, midterms, and final exams. The high school schedule is also complex. Students juggle 6 to 7 classes with multiple teachers across varying grade levels. Because teachers already manage classrooms with multiple students with IEPs and 504s, an ESOL teacher who is skilled at the high school level is essential to collaborate with up to 20 teachers in any given week to provide the necessary modifications to ensure student success. Our current ML program is more than a pull-out program. It is an integrated system providing specialized English reading and writing classes, push and support, academic support classes, content modification, critical social emotional support, and assistance with access to basic needs. I have seen firsthand how much time and energy is needed to effectively run this program. It is not a part-time or even a 3/4 time job. I believe this is a district that values student success and equitable access for all students. Losing our full-time program will diminish equitable access, could cause an increase in dropout rates as students are more likely to fall through the cracks, increase stress on our teachers, and negatively impact postgraduate outcomes. Many multilingual students aspire to attend 4-year universities, and a lack of a comprehensive full-time language program could hinder their ability to reach those goals. I understand that numbers sometimes drive decisions. In this case, I urge you to look beyond the numbers to understand the complexities of our high school program and the real impact the loss of a full-time ESOL teacher would have. High school is the last stop before adulthood. Without sufficient multilingual learning support, students risk leaving school unprepared for their future. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
I'm the senior project advisor, so I come with my own timer here. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Rebecca Peterson, and I have proudly taught English at Freeport High School for 15 years. Tonight, I ask you to reconsider the proposed elimination of the full-time ESOL teacher position. This is not about one individual. It is about what the role represents. The ESOL teacher is a champion, a mentor, and a critical link between our school and students navigating a new world. Their impact cannot be replicated by someone divided between multiple buildings. Last year, I taught multilingual learners without a co-teacher. Despite my experience, I struggled to challenge them without causing frustration. At the same time, my other students were impacted. Without additional support, I had to devote more time to scaffolding lessons, which took away valuable instructional time. This year, with a dedicated ESOL teacher, the difference was immediate. Student engagement improved. The ESOL teacher didn't just support students, they empowered them. They built confidence and a sense of belonging. They fostered an inclusive environment, held every student to a high standard, and helped me become a better teacher. With that support, I was able to give more attention and meaningful instruction to all students. With this position in place, everyone benefited. By the end of the first unit on the American Dream, multilingual learners were sharing their own stories. They boldly spoke to my classes about their harrowing and heartbreaking journeys to the United States and their hopes for the future. They didn't just learn English, they found their voices. For students outside the Multilingual Learner Program, this was more than a cultural awareness. It was an academic experience that deepened critical thinking. They weren't just reading about the American Dream, they were engaging in real-world discussions, making connections between texts and lived experiences. These moments rely on a full-time ESOL teacher. This position does not end with classroom support. On a day-to-day basis, the role requires modifying and adapting assignments in advance and on the fly. For all the teachers they work with, meeting each student where they are. If this position has 18 students and each of the students has up to 8 teachers, they are actively differentiating for up to 144 different combinations of skill levels and content areas at the high school level. This is not just support. This is an essential specialized service that ensures our multilingual learners can access their education in meaningful ways. Without a full-time ESOL teacher, the impact will ripple through our school. Teachers like me will be left to modify and differentiate alone, without adequate training or time to do it, resulting in lower quality instruction and divided attention for all. In this scenario, every student loses access to the best version of me as a teacher. That is not equity, that is not excellence, both of which our district promises. I urge you to reconsider the elimination of this position. The workload is too great, the needs too complex, and the impact too significant. When we fully support our multilingual learners, we enrich our entire school and uphold RSU5's commitment to celebrate individuality and empower students to achieve their highest personal aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Grivois. This is my 12th year of teaching here at Freeport High School, and I'm convinced, so thank you for your time. But really, I'd like to talk about the type of district that I believe RSU5 to be. I've taught here in RSU5 my entire career, and for the duration of it, we have been a district that adds to the student support system that we have, not a district that subtracts from it. A fully staffed multilingual learner program at the high school and the teacher who built it are tremendous additions to RSU5. First, this program allows our students to bring diverse perspectives, cultural knowledge, and multilingual abilities to our classrooms, and it enriches the high school experience. A strong MLL program doesn't just benefit the students directly enrolled in it, it creates cascading effects. I have stood in front of this board before and advocated for a social studies curriculum that better fosters cross-cultural understanding and tries to help all students thrive in an increasingly globalized world. And we got your support in that effort. Maintaining a dedicated high school program signals our commitment to leveraging those same strengths and intentions and helps us continuing to work towards a school culture that values and celebrates diversity. That's the type of district that I think that we are. That's an addition. Secondly, a full-time MLL program at the high school creates professional development opportunities. The presence of a full-time ESOL teacher benefits more than just our students. It equips our entire staff to better understand and implement inclusive, differentiated teaching strategies. We have been challenged directly by the creation of this program and the person who created it, who is an outstanding educator, to get better at our jobs. When we walk into the bathroom at the high school, we're reminded to get better at our jobs. Her professional development is everywhere. We need to think about differentiation with a wider lens. We have to build out those scaffolds and support these students. Inevitably, that supports everyone. That benefits everybody. A strong MLL program doesn't just support a specific population. It strengthens the foundation of our teaching practices in the school. That's in addition to RSU5. Lastly, I just want to address the reality of what it takes to build and sustain an effective program like this. It requires the effort of a skilled, full-time professional, someone who understands the complexity of high school schedules, curriculum demands, and the nuances of adolescent second language acquisition. Without a dedicated position, I believe we're setting ourselves up to have systemic gaps that will hurt our students and even drive them away. I urge you to consider the long-term vision of what a fully staffed program represents. It's not just a service, it's an investment in the future success of our students and our community. Every MLL student who graduates feeling confident in their English skills and connected to their peers represents a win for our school and is a plus for RSU5. That's the type of place that I believe we are. That's why I work here. Addition, not subtraction, keeps us coming back to do the good work that we do here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim.
Dear members of the RSU5 board, my name is Lana O'Shea. I am writing to express my deep concern and worry regarding the proposed elimination of one of our ESOL teachers. As an ESOL teacher, I have witnessed firsthand how our program has grown into the successful and effective team as it currently stands. In 2020, I was hired to be the sole ESOL teacher to provide service among our 6 schools. I can tell you firsthand it did not work. The amount of travel between schools cut down on the time dedicated to students, and there were students who fell between the cracks. Students did not get the 2 periods of support per day to be successful in the rigor of our curriculum. We know better now, and we cannot let that happen again. I recognize this is a difficult budget year, acknowledging the reduction of our ML students, but the proposed cut of an ESOL teacher is excessive and sends a message to our most vulnerable that an ML student's educational success does not matter. But I do not come here today to speak as an ESOL teacher. I am here tonight as a person who went through an ESOL program. Like so many families who make the difficult decision to leave their home, their country, their family, and their friends, my parents came here from the Philippines in search of the American dream. And one of those dreams was to have happy, successful children, contributing members of society, and individuals who will give back to their community. This is what I envision for our ML students. For the first 5 years of my life, I spoke only Ilocano and Tagalog. I'm sure you can imagine the difficulties of adjusting to my new environment, my new language, while having the expectation and want to do well in school. What you cannot imagine is the palpable isolation of not being able to communicate with my peers and the growing belief that school is too hard. It wasn't until I started first grade that I had Mrs. Bath. She was my 5', 2" Chinese Hawaiian ESOL teacher, and she was my everything. She was the person who could give me the time to differentiate the work, the time to let me observe first before trying to speak, and the person who believed I had value as a learner and as a person. My time with her was my safe landing space to breathe and become. Over time, my parents and Mrs. Bath developed a trusting relationship. My parents felt like they were part of the school community. They would be a team working together to make sure I can continue on to pursue higher education. Feeling supported in our school system and community is dependent on relationships built over time, consistency, and trust. Instead of reducing a full-time teacher, I would love to explore alternate solutions to manage the cost of our ESOL program, acknowledging the reduction in student numbers without compromising the quality of our work. Without overstepping, I am proposing to maintain 2 full-time ESOL teachers and reduce the contract of a 3rd person. I understand the need to make budgetary decisions, and I welcome the opportunity to further discuss how we can work together to maintain the strong, cohesive team, ensuring the success of our RSU 5 ML students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anna.
I think it's my turn. Board members, thanks for allowing me to attend tonight. Excuse me. My name is Charles Henshaw. I'm a Freeport resident, taxpayer, stakeholder. My wife and I have been in Freeport now for about 10 years. We have 3 grown children, none of whom went through the system here in Maine. I'm here tonight to speak to a different issue altogether than the very weighty issue that I found when I got here. I was here a month ago for the budget meeting, and there were quite a few seats available. Not the case tonight. A week ago today, on January 29th, an executive order titled Ending Radical Indoctrination in K through 12 Schooling was issued from the White House. For this citizen and member of the Freeport community, the content, statements, allegations, insinuations, etc., laid out in that executive order are quite troubling. And I'm simply here tonight to implore all of the members of this board to find the time to read carefully that executive order and to consider, I recognize that there are legal implications to doing something like this, but to consider as a board issuing a statement articulating the board's position regarding the contents of that executive order. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Maddie. Welcome back.
Thank you. My name is Maddie Vertenten. I live in Freeport. I'm so moved by the organization and the commitment demonstrated by such a large gathering of FHS staff tonight. This is something I only witnessed a handful of times on my 6 years serving on this board, and it's impressive. And I knowing many of you and knowing the commitment of this board, I implore you to take their words very seriously. I want to speak to an issue that I feel is adjacent to what they spoke about, but not directly about that, but it's community support for the RSU 5 budget. As a taxpayer, I've always supported the school budget. I believe that students and educators are not where we should focus any efforts to economize. Rather, I feel that these are the most important places for us to invest our tax dollars. Wow, I'm nervous. This is, wow. I didn't expect to be nervous. I mean, I am out of practice. Anyway, I'm here to let you all know that I trust you to do the diligent work of determining what our budget should be. And I know, because I know you to be people that have always engaged in such diligent work. I place my trust in you to take these concerns very seriously. In these difficult times, when our current president threatens to undermine systems of education and indeed to abolish the Department of Education, I believe that one of the most important things I can do is support my school board and, most importantly, support the budget. That's why I'm letting you know that I trust you to put forward a budget that will provide for, educate, protect, and safeguard our most vulnerable assets, our children. I also wanted to come here today in hopes that other members of the community might be listening in and make the decision for themselves to support our schools, this board, and the upcoming budget as a way to not comply with the egregious actions proposed by the Trump administration. And I would encourage anyone in the community who agrees with this perspective to engage vocally now, well in advance of the annual budget meeting in May and the budget validation referendum in June. I cannot believe that we're living in times where supporting our schools feels like an act of civil disobedience. But there you have it. I don't abide by any arbitrary measures or pre-concluded idea about what percentage our budget should rise or fall by in any given year. Again, I trust you to make that determination and to look beyond the numbers as a previous commenter requested you to do. It has always been my contention that our students and our teachers must come first. Although I know we live in uncertain times financially, especially with the threat of tariffs looming, I still would support our school budget, no matter what the impact is to my personal finances, because for the third time, I trust you to make the right decisions about what our budget should be, and to safeguard the future and the safety of our students in RSU 5 as our most important community investment. Thank you for everything that you do. I know that the work of a school board director is extremely meaningful and extremely challenging work. Thank you for your service to our community and to our children.
Thank you, Maddie. Okay, so that was everyone we had on the list. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for everyone who got up and took the time to speak this evening. We always appreciate hearing feedback, as the gentleman, Mr. Henshaw, said earlier. We don't generally get a ton of public comment, so thank you all for coming and sharing with us today. So we will continue on with our agenda. Item 8, report from the superintendent.
Okay, I have a few resignations to report tonight to the board. Rachel Medeiros, Moore Street School Ed Tech. Connie Carpenter, bus driver. Kate Mishu, Moore Street School Grade 2. It will be for next year. And Jana Glenn, Moore Street School Grade 2 for next year. And that's the end of the report tonight.
Okay. So we don't have any administrator reports this evening or board comments, no policy review. So we will move right into our first session of the budget review with the individual administrators sharing their budget requests for the upcoming year. And we will start with the Moore Street School. Oh, that's right. Sorry, you told me that. Yes. Jean's going to give us an update first, and then we're going to go to the individual reports.
Okay, we're just going to provide a brief update on the budget. Last week, the board had a couple of requests for some data that's provided for you. We were asked to provide some class sizes with the proposed reductions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We've also since received an additional request from a board member about staffing at the high school, and we don't have that this evening, but we'll certainly get that for you for next time by course. And the other information we'll share this evening is the proposed budget impact summary for the board. The ED 279s are in, so we know our subsidy, as well as we have confirmed information from our towns. So we'll be able to provide that information for you as well tonight. And I think that will help sort of set the stage for folks on what we're looking at for budget. So the first slide is also in the handbook on page 3. This is what we presented last week for you for pre-K 8. That was the class sizes based on the 2024-2025 staffing levels. The next slide is at the request of the board. This you can find also on page 4 of your handbook. That's the projected class sizes with the projected teachers, with the staffing levels, with those recommendations and reductions for pre-K. So there's that data there for you to mull over later on. Looking at just a snapshot again, what we presented last week, and you're certainly going to begin to hear from all the different schools and departments starting tonight. We're looking at Article 1, that's all the regular education and all the associated costs, everywhere from salaries and benefits to supplies, books, and so forth. And you can see there's an increase of 2.48% in our request. We look at special education, that's in Article 2 and all the costs associated with that. And there's an increase of 10.95% there. Career and Tech Ed, that's our portion that we pay Region 10. That one, I will remind everyone, is estimated because they haven't finished their budget process yet. So we added a 9% increase there until we have that figure from them. Article 4, that's our other instruction. That includes all our co-curricular and athletics. There's an 8.14% increase there. Article 5, student and staff support, an increase of 6.25% there. System admin, there's an increase of 7.13% there. School administration, an increase of 7.36%. Transportation and buses, you'll see an increase of 21.74% there. And this evening we're going to talk a bit about more with the board about vehicle replacement. So we'll touch on why that's up as much as it is. Facilities and maintenance is up 7.55%. And our debt service, we're always happy when our debt service goes down as over years as we pay some of those things up, so there's a decrease there. All other, that's where our school nutrition program is. There's a decrease there. And reminding folks that that's not the total cost of the school nutrition program, that's the cost, that's the portion that in our budget that we put towards the school nutrition budget. So overall, we're looking at the proposed operating costs. We're looking at $43,903,018 for this 25-26 school year. And when we add in the adult education portion, is $43,991,018. So we get to, this is the impact summary data. Some folks will look at these little snippets. If you would like to look at the whole sheet at once, which some people like to follow down, it's easier if you turn to page 8. Well, we're looking at 8 and 9 in our handbook. We'll start with page 8. And if we just look through here, if we look at, you see there's our total, our proposed $43,991,018 is our proposed budget. And you look at, remember, this is just the expenditure side. It's an increase of 5.72% on the expenditure side from last year. When we move down and we're looking at revenues, the shared revenues, that we'll talk about that a little bit more. I'll go over that in detail. That's at the bottom of page 8 in your handbook, but I'll explain what that $1.59 million is. I'll explain where that came from. We do know from our ED 279 that we are, if you remember, part of an educational cost center, so we get extra subsidy for that, and we lost a little bit in that this year, so it's $2,481.60 less. When we look at our overall subsidy, we had a huge decrease this year. For us, we lost $206,963.48 in decreased subsidy that we have. So we move on to the next slide, and in moving down, this is sort of in the middle of page 8 if you're following along there. We're looking at, we have here, we're going to less our shared debt that we have, which is the 118,908. That's where our debt's gone down. And then we look at the required local contribution, and I know the board had, the finance committee did a great job last year going through what those all those mean for us. And in order to get the subsidy, we have, it's $19,988,378. So you look down to the additional required local monies for this, which is the operating budget, less the state revenue and aid. Take away the state allocation and the non-shared debt and the total required local contribution, and that's in level E, letter E, and that's $15,028,602. So we look at, when you take this all, looking at all those factors, what is the actual net impact to the taxation district-wide? It's 7.21%, and this is with the proposed reductions. We go on to the next slide. This is where we're looking at, first of all, what are those additional monies that are, and this is all based on your cost sharing plan. So those are by town. If you look, they will tell us additional money from Durham, Freeport, and Pownal, which will be required, and that will all feed into what the actual tax impact is. And looking at shared revenue, the things that this is what we anticipate. We know, as you know, we have a contract to maintain Hunter Road Field. On this, it's up a little bit for next year. We have a 5-year contract with the town. So it's $106,981 and some change. A shared employee with the town, that remained the same, as well as our anticipated state agency client and Medicaid stayed the same. Miscellaneous. Primarily looking at interest over time. We believe we can increase that amount to $259,000. To RSU 5 from Laugh and Learn, they actually pay us to. We're really looking at the center near Mast Landing and other spaces they use. They increase that contribution for next year to $15,000. We believe what we'll get from CDS will remain pretty constant at $79,000. We have that small aspirations account we haven't totally spent yet for $8,600. An undesignated fund balance, you'll see an increase there. We're still recommending the $900,000 towards the budget, but we're also going to recommend an additional $168,000, and that's going to be part of the vehicle replacement plan. And we're going to, and later tonight, you'll see what that looks like. So that's also why we have an increase in the budget. But we're also going to put $168,000 from undesignated fund balance, so the vehicle replacement will not impact the taxpayer. we move on. Now we're on to page 9, and it's broken down by town. This is where we feed all those the required local. We're looking at non-shared debt and so forth. And I'll just read out for what each town with the proposed budget, with the proposed reductions and additions. For the town of Durham at this moment, it would need 7.64% increase. For Freeport, it'd be 4.05%. And Pownal, the tax impact would be 6.74%. So those are the updates we have for you this evening. I know that's a lot of data in your handbook. Again, if you want to if it's easier to look at that one sheet, it's there for you, and we can certainly have more. We'll have many more conversations in the budget. And I'll say it's certainly, as we know, as you can see, even where we're at this moment in time, we have quite an increase that we're proposing. We also have quite an increase to the taxpayers we're proposing. I certainly want to thank I know some folks went home, and that's but certainly folks that have spoken from the heart. They're very, very difficult decisions that the board has to make. But we want to give you the context of sort of this is where, if we're at what we're proposing, this is where we are with the budget.
Okay, now we're ready for Julie?
We're ready for Julie.
Okay.
Good evening. So I don't think I will take the full 20 minutes unless you have a lot of questions for me. But as we've approached this year's budget, I come with appreciation for all that we've had recently, and I'm proposing 2 staffing cuts at Moore Street based on our numbers. As we know, often it's hard to predict our incoming pre-K and K numbers, and consequently we've had particularly low numbers in K this current year, and it looks like our rising kindergarten class is smaller too. So then we're proposing a reduction in both K and 1, and our numbers should still align with our class size policy. And there is no other asks in our budget other than maintaining what we have. That is it. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions for Julie? Yeah.
Thank you. That was nice and brief. I just had a question about the academic leadership stipend.
Yeah.
Could you just explain? I'm just curious, like what that involves, like who that will be, I guess, and what their role is going to be.
Yeah, so that was our addition in last year's budget. And so we added a pre-K team leader to our leadership team, which has meant that, the person who's taken on that role is Asia Stefan. She's our most senior pre-K teacher at this point, and has joined our leadership team, and that addition has really helped. Often pre-K can feel like it's an isolated grade level because the programming is so different, and so by including Asia on that team, we definitely have seen already a better cohesiveness between pre-K and the work that the rest of the school is doing.
I probably should know this off the top of my head, but can you remind me what the threshold is in our class size policy?
Yeah, so K2 is 18 is the target number.
Desirable. Okay.
Yeah.
What's that? 20 is the threshold. Okay.
And actually, as I look at these numbers, even, we have our pre-K screening on Friday, and our incoming pre-K numbers look higher than they've been in a while. We already have 40 students registered for incoming pre-K, and it's pretty early. We intentionally do it early because local childcares want answers from people. dips for the upcoming year, and we often we do a second round of screening because we do it so early, so I'm anticipating a higher number. And we've kind of vacillated between relying on live birth data, and sometimes it's been reliable, sometimes not, but it was, I believe, something like 62 in the current rising kindergarten grade and 89 for the following year. So it seems that those patterns are a reliable source of information for us right now. So it's these two grade levels that have dipped, and then we'll bounce back to our typical numbers following.
How many did you say we already have signed up?
40.
Okay. And we can accommodate 64.
64.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mara.
Thanks so much, Julie. I just wanted to make sure that I'm looking at this correctly. So for the 25-26 staffing levels with recommended reductions, I see the number is the same for the pre-K and K. Well, for all of them, I guess. So does that mean that the rising pre-K class is 64 right now? Okay, now I'm thinking it through in my head. It's 64 right now, and then you'll add some students potentially who didn't go to pre-K?
Yeah, so actually the current number is, we have 48 in our current pre-K.
Okay.
So on that first table, that first box should be 48.
I think the
And
way it's
then-
written is to show the upcoming projected
Yeah.
enrollment and what it looks like with the staffing there is right now,
Right.
like the current staffing
see.
versus the proposed staffing.
see.
It's
And we
not like
always,
a roll forward.
yeah, and we
Got it,
always
okay.
project a full pre-K because we never know, and it's that number is typically less than our regular intake. We normally get students beyond who are in our pre-K who join us in kindergarten.
Okay, gotcha. So the 48 is the, or so that amount is lower than what it currently is. Are these the current numbers?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's you're anticipating it'll be lower than 70.
it will, like, I would think it's probably between around 70, more realistic based on what I see right now.
Okay, thank you.
But it's hard to tell.
Thanks so much, Julie. One question, and maybe another if I can get my brain screwed on right. Can you just refresh our memory on sort of the history of teachers in these grades? I feel like how long have they been 5? And yes, how long have they been 5?
So when I first came, the 2015-2016 school year, we were at 4 classes per grade level. There was a 5th first grade teacher added that year, and those class sizes were very small. They were kind of like at 13s and 14s where that 5th class was added. They probably would have been 4s. And then over time, not long after that first year, we were starting to add at kindergarten, and then those numbers were more regularly around 80 plus for a while.
I guess, yeah, that's super helpful. I guess if we were to go forward with this recommendation, is your sense, not knowing that you can't see the future, but can you see the future? But how long would do you think we would remain at 4? In other words, sort of are we going back for a year to then have to bump it back up next year? And I guess the follow-up to that would be like, what's the impact of that kind of vacillation back and forth?
Yeah. I kind of project that for the next 3 years, as those 2 grade levels move through the school, we would stay at 4 classes per grade level for those cohorts. And if the 89 live births is a number that's reliable, then I would anticipate that we're bouncing back with the incoming pre-K grade. So it would kind of, the bubble would, I don't think you call it a bubble when it's shrinking, right? But we would chase it and then we would bounce back. But who knows?
Other questions for Julie?
Sorry, Colin.
We'll just go back and forth between you.
Can you remind me, Julie, if we start to see enrollment increasing, how that's handled? So if it's looking like over the summer that there's some more students, like even 5 more, so because with the class being right, with the K class being right on the kind of line of the size limits that we aim for, how do you approach that?
So I haven't had this conversation with Jean, so I'm just going to kind of throw this out there right here. So I actually am looking at potential flexibility across different grades, and that maybe if we end up with a surprising number of kindergartners that our predictions and projections are not accurate, we potentially could have the reduction in second instead of, we've just recently lost a couple of our second graders. So that number in this moment in time, and who knows who moves in next week, is at our first grade group are at 76. We've just had a couple kids leave. So that grade could go to a 4, and maybe that makes better sense with the older students versus our youngest. But again, it's so I mean, I'm sure Jean and I would have conversations about when we're going to start talking about those decisions. But I think there's enough flexibility across the grades at this moment to really think that we wouldn't be in a position where we'd be panic placing. If there's ever a question and we're watching numbers and worrying that we're going to get too far, I would often hold placement decisions. Like usually we do that at the end of the school year, rolling into the summer. But if we're concerned, we would wait and do placement in August in case we have to kind of make a shift.
Placement of whom? Placement of whom?
Placement of students to their future class and teacher. Okay. And so we would just wait. Oftentimes it's better off waiting than having children and families thinking they're going one way and then have to change. So in other years we've done that where we've had to watch numbers, and we've added, in my time, we've added teachers, kindergarten teacher particularly late, and we just held that placement till August and then let families know who their teacher was, so we're not last minute making different plans.
Sorry, I thought I would remember another thing. Could you maybe speak a little bit about how you and your team, your teaching team, understand the differences between a class size of 14, 15 and a class size of 18, 19, 20, both in terms of the learning for the learning for the students, but also for the workload for the teachers?
I think when we are talking in the teen numbers, it doesn't make that much difference. If you asked our teaching team, I think they would say the optimal number is 16. Like that, when you're less than that, it's not enough kids. Like you don't have enough balance. In one of our kindergarten classrooms right now, who has 15 and a few students who are not in the classroom very much, the dynamics in that room, it's hard for the leaders to rise and the role models to shine. And so it does become, okay, we don't have enough children here with not enough diverse learners to really build a dynamic cohort. I think 18 is absolutely the tipping point in K, particularly where routines are being built and established and children are still learning how to learn. But I do think second graders could easily be in 20s without that. I mean, we did make a decision a couple of years ago when we had a teacher who left under a surprise medical situation, and we couldn't hire a new teacher, and we put second graders into classes of 26. While it wasn't ideal, the commitment to quality instruction was what we felt was the priority. And so highly qualified teachers can do really good work with those kinds of numbers. So I think having started my career in the UK with 32 children and no planning time, I think what gets compromised is kind of the depth at which you know and have relationships with families and children once you get into 30, 32, 33. But I think when we're talking these numbers, I think we're good.
Any other questions for Julie? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. I lost my paper. Pownal, Holly.
Good evening. I also want to say thank you for all the support that the board has given to the school. As you look at my budget summary, there is one additional thing that we are looking to add, and that is our summer programming. I noted at the end of it that this programming has been previously funded through grants, and that was through the pandemic. So 2025 is the first year that it's added back into the budget. So we're looking to provide programming for 65 hours, and there's a cost of $1,950 for that. And no other staffing changes.
How many students does that support?
So I had to kind of look over the trend of how many students. Typically, we service close to 15 students. There are summers where we've invited more, but families can't make that commitment. So we look at the number of students that we're servicing in RTI currently, and then send out invitations and hopefully get. And if there's a bigger turnout, then we may cut back on some hours. So still working with that same amount of money, but servicing students to the best that we can with that money. So,
thank you. Questions for Holly? So I guess mine is a flip question from Julie's, where the key, the kind of the ideal density starts at kind of 15, and we only have one class over 15 in Pownal. How do they build that sort of balance and leaders and when there's not even enough kids to get to that 15 level?
Well, we deal more with not so much the numbers, but many of these students have come through many grades together, so we're more like a family, I think it works. I mean, as a kindergarten teacher myself for 10 years, and that was when I had morning session and afternoon session. Class sizes under 12 were like, you really didn't want that, for sure. And then when I had classes of 18, it was perfect. So I agree with how Julie summarized that. So yeah.
Other questions for Holly? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Mast Landing. Emily.
Good evening. Like the other principals, I always kind of feel this moment of gratitude at this point when I think back on the previous year, and it was about a year ago, I think it was Valentine's Day last year, that I was requesting the addition both of a classroom teacher to support the opposite of where Julie is right now, which we had some slightly larger than typical cohorts that are coming through, and the addition of an assistant principal, and both those additions have just been monumental for our school community. I know I've spoken about some of the work that our assistant principal, Scott Emery, has done in the fall, but it's been so valuable in supporting a couple areas in our school. Chronic absenteeism is at pre-pandemic levels. We're at 8% right now, which we haven't I pulled the data from 17-18 and 18-19 just to make sure I was speaking accurately, and I am. We've been able to provide a level of responsive student support that has both been supportive to kids who are having trouble in the moment, but also preserving instruction for other kids in those classrooms. We are on track to complete the 140 teacher observations that we, previously I did each year. Now we've been able to split those, which results in enhanced support for staff, particularly new staff, as they are learning our systems and curriculum. And it's also, Scott has enabled Susan Albertini, our school counselor, to let go of some responsibilities she had taken on so that she can prioritize the important work she does supporting students and families, particularly, and that's been an area she's been able to grow her support, is parent outreach this year, which has been great. So thank you again for support in that regard. As you'll see in our proposed budget, there is one position that was a reserve position. So this was added very late last year as we were closely tracking numbers. And that position is not included in the proposed budget, as well as our bench sub. So we'll say immediately following the pandemic, we added a RTI position in regular education that existed to serve when we were short subs. You can imagine during that time, we were very short subs, and we are fortunate in part because we have many committed parents in our community who have signed up to be guest teachers in our school community, that we now, when we have a vacancy, I have 20 people I can call rather than 3 or 4. It doesn't mean we never have an uncovered vacancy. I pulled the numbers today. We've had 7 full-day vacancies that have been uncovered that we've needed to rely on that ed tech position to cover. So it is valuable. I won't say it isn't valuable, but when we look at the needs collectively across Mast Landing and RSU 5 as a whole, we feel like we can move forward without that position while maintaining the quality of the work we do with kids. Any questions?
That was going to be my question on how we went from 555 to 545, but it was 2 positions. So one was the bench sub. Okay. Yeah. Kara.
Thank you for this. Is there any way that you can find out if those substitutes are planning on being back again next year? Like, do you ever have a sense of that, or is there a way you could get a sense of that?
I will say our most consistent, reliable guest teachers, many of them have been with us for several years. I anticipate we may lose them as their students go to middle and high school, but we've been fortunate that we seem to have a consistent cohort of parents for whom that's a great option. They enjoy being involved in our school. Many of them have teaching backgrounds or early childhood education backgrounds. So I don't know that we'll always have the same folks, but I do anticipate, just based on trends and patterns, that we're getting folks in as their children are entering elementary school, and then they're staying. I'm looking at Julie. I anticipate it's across both buildings, Moore Street and Mast Landing, and that folks feel safer coming back into schools too. I think that's made a difference, and post-pandemic, that was a huge challenge that we were facing. The compensation for guest teachers has also improved dramatically, I think, making it a more feasible option for folks as well.
Which grade level did we add to last year?
So last year we added, so essentially this year, I know it's a little bit confusing. So this year we have 15 homeroom teachers. We have 5 at each of the 3 grade levels. Last year, the addition in the budget was adding it at grade 4. So this year's 4th grade cohort, which is our largest cohort, it's over 100 students. And then we added that reserve position into the current 5th grade position.
Okay. So that's why that one stays at 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those students are going
following that large group
to the middle school. The incoming 3rd graders next year will be at 5, and then we'll have 4 teachers. Like our 3rd grade cohort this year is across 5 teachers. They will be spread across 4 teachers next year. So that's the cohort. If you're thinking about kind of who's experiencing a change, it's the current 3rd graders at Mast Landing School.
Okay. Other questions for Emily?
Thanks so much, Emily. So just making sure I heard you right. So this year, the 5 third grade classes at Mast Landing will go into 4 fourth grade classes next year.
Correct. And one of the things, if you've looked at the class policy closely, is the lower elementary class sizes are slightly different than the upper elementary class sizes. And so this is an instance when that class transitioned from Moore Street as second graders to Mast Landing as third, they were kind of right on the cusp. I think they were 88 last year. We're now, I think as of today, they're at 85. And so it's like both at the class size expectation rises a little bit. Our cap is 22 rather than 20. And it can get a little bit tricky when you have those cohorts that are right on that cusp.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for this, Julie, and forgive me. What did I say? I was just thinking about...
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. So, Steve, what are we all doing here tonight? Apologies.
No worries.
If we go with that reduction to 4 in grade 4, and we maintain our current size of 89 for grade 3, but we would be looking at a class size of 21 with our 84. Aren't we starting to kind of like drive that number back up again? Like, aren't we kind of getting crunched again at grade 4?
So would they be on the larger side of what is in our elementary schools across the district? Yes. I don't think a couple of the things we consider both at the school level but also at the district level is the cohort themselves. And this actually came up. We had a similar conversation last year with the current 5th grade cohort who had gone from 5 classes in 3rd to 4 in 4th. And I advocated really strongly for them to be 5 in 5th, even though they're about the same size as the current 3rd grade. Thanks for following. I realize I feel like I need a chart or something to show. Because there are factors that impact what that 21 looks like. There are factors like how many of those students receive the majority of their programming in other settings. If you have a few, that class size, when you walk into a class, you're likely not to see 21 kids. You might during certain parts of the day, but if you walk in a reading lesson, there aren't 21 kids. The behavioral needs of the students in that cohort and the academic needs of that cohort. And so, for example, this year's 5th grade, when we looked at their data, I felt strongly, and having seen them exist as both 5 cohorts and 4, that they would be more successful in 5th. That's been what's been actualized this year. And so I think once you start getting to those numbers that are kind of close to what our district policy is, then it becomes a qualitative discussion. Because I'll say, like, a good example, the current 6th grade cohort, we had larger than typical classes last year, and there are teachers who will say like 24 in that cohort still was less preparation, right? Like the teachers get this, than like 16 in this cohort. And I think that's like one of the things we want to be careful of with policy that determines class size is we still need to be cautious about considering the kids in both directions. I think sometimes we're going to have 22 and 23, and I'm probably going to say like this, it's okay knowing this cohort. And there's sometimes we might be at 19 or 20, and it's like, we've got to talk about what meets the needs of those kids in that moment.
Just one follow-up, Steve. My recollection also is that y'all can be relatively flexible in terms of the sort of year-to-year which teachers are assigned to which grades. And so would you imagine that, again, sort of over the next couple of years, that it might not remain 5-4-5, and that you have the teaching team that you need in order to sort of make those adjustments?
Yeah, I actually think it's an embedded blessing in our school size and the fact that we have these slight fluctuations, because it's really good professionally for teachers to teach across grades. Because the reality is, if you're teaching 3rd grade, you're really also teaching 1st, 2nd, and 4th in any given classroom. And so teachers, I have teachers who ask to change grades. I have teachers I ask to change grades, and then they like kind of, 3 months into it go like, oh, I see what you meant. Like this was going to be really professionally valuable. So teachers have been flexible with that. And I also think it's been really good just for their knowledge of curriculum and scope and sequence and meeting the diversity of kids in their classrooms.
Any other questions for Emily? Thank you. All right, instructional support, Alicia. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? No?
A little bit.
Can you hear me now?
I think you might just need to talk louder.
Louder? Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. All right. So first off, I just want to say thank you to the our ESLO teachers. They work incredibly hard. They're passionate about what they do, and they certainly care about the students who they teach, as do other people that came here to support tonight. So for next year, the Special Education Department is not recommending the addition of the 1-year special education position that was funded in fiscal year 25 through Article 2 in the reserve account to next year's budget. Student caseloads for special education staff will be adjusted accordingly. And the second would be due to a decline in enrollment within the multilingual learner population. The Office of Instructional Support is proposing the elimination of 1 ESOL teaching position from October 1st, 2023 to October 1st of 2024. The multilingual learner population has decreased by 70 students. I'm happy to talk further about that if you would like me just to do so now. Okay.
I just had a quick question. I was wondering, like, if there was a projection to whether like the multilingual learner population will increase or decrease in the following years.
So based on a handout that I had sent around. So based on projected enrollment, we will be decreasing again for next year. Okay. All right. So the decision to eliminate one of the endorsed positions is based on the number of students identified and the level of services needed. The data I reviewed and will be referencing tonight was put together by our ESLO teachers. So I want to start off by reviewing some of the district's historical data. This is on the sheet with the October 1st count that you all have. For those of you too, there's sheets over there if you'd like to follow along. So the data starts in 2017 and is based off of the October 1st count. So please keep in mind that the numbers do not count students who are on monitor or exited. Students who receive an Access composite score of 4.5 are placed on monitor / an exit status, and they don't receive direct services as they have reached a level of proficiency to be on monitor exit status. So just quickly, monitor of MLs, it's similar to being on watch for the gifted and talented population, and similar to consult for MTSS and similar to consult for special education. So in 2017, 2018, we had 28 students identified as of the October 1st count, and we had 1 ESLO teacher. The following year, we had 20 students, and we continued with 1 teacher. And again, the year after that, 2019, 2020, there were 16 students, and we had 1 teacher. In 2020 to 2021, the position was reduced to half-time because there were 14 students. In 21-22, the count went back up to 24 students, and an additional teacher was hired, and the half-time teacher became full-time again. So there were 2 full-time teachers in 21-22. In 22-23, we increased to 101 students, and there were 4 teachers but 3 full-time positions. As you can see, there were 2 positions that were split, 0.4 and 0.6, which makes 1 full-time teacher. In 23-24, we increased to 116 students. This year we had 4 teachers, 1 of which was hired in December.
So the district had posted a 4th position due to the increased enrollment in October. The person that accepted the position wasn't able to start until December. At that point in time, we had students leaving, but the district had decided to keep that 4th person on. This year, there was a decrease. We have 46 students as of October 1st, and there are 3 full-time positions. The district had kept the 3rd teacher for this year, as the district was unsure of how many more students may come in as numbers were still settling. Next year, the projected enrollment is to be 37. If we were to move with 2 positions for next year, that would be a total of 18.5 students per teacher, which is less than the 28 and the 20 students that one teacher was servicing across the district alone in 2017, 2018, and 2018-2019. So as you've heard, next year the projected enrollment is 37, which is a decrease of 9 additional students from the October 1st count. It's important to note that those 37 students do not take into account students who may be placed on monitor status after we review the results of this year's WIDA testing, which is taking place now. Based on this year's data, if we take into account the number of students who receive exposure only and who scored a 4 or higher on last year's WIDA, we may have an additional 6 students less than projected, bringing our projected number to 31 for next year. Based on the data, the number of students, and the level of service they require, this can be successfully supported with 2 teachers. Currently, the high school has the highest number of projected enrolled students, which is 15 for next year. The middle school currently has 4 projected students. Based on the number of students, and again, their level of need, these 2 buildings would share a teacher, with the teacher being predominantly at the high school, and students will still have meaningful and equitable access to their education. The second teacher would provide services for the remaining elementary students at Moore Street, Mast Landing, and Durham Community School. There are many factors that must be considered when determining the most appropriate support for our students, which includes the level of service time. And again, not all students receive the same amount of service time. It's based on their scores. To name a few, we would be looking at the student's age, English level of proficiency, amount of interrupted schooling, schooling in the student's background, and the student's developmental level. This information is located in our LAO plan policy, which was last updated by the board on January 25th, 2023. As far as scheduling goes, it's evolving. We would need the latest WIDA scores, which would help us determine the level of service and need, and I would be collaborating between buildings to determine scheduling. Any questions?
I'm curious how the scheduling block works amongst different buildings.
Yeah, so at the high school, there's block scheduling. And so, just going to refer to my handout. Students typically would receive the same level of service as the class that they were in. So if a student is in 30 minutes daily of an ELA class, they would receive the 30 minutes daily of the service. However, again, we have to take into account different factors. So developmental level, all of those pieces. At the high school, if they would receive an ELA class every other day, that would be appropriate for them to receive the same service every other day for the ESL programming. So it's really dependent upon the age and the class time that students would be receiving in their general ed setting.
Only as it relates to ELA?
Well, that they would be receiving an ELA service, so a service to help support their language development in English.
So maybe
there are other factors. So there's push-in services, but if we're looking at a direct service where we would be pulling students out of the class, it's appropriate for them to receive the same amount of service that they would have received in the gen ed setting. But again, there's other factors that we would take into consideration.
Okay.
Does that make
So it's not like it's one of the blocks on their schedule.
It could be.
Oh.
It could be. Yep. It could be built. It's built into their schedule. So it could be a block every other day of a service.
Okay. And so the thought is there would be certain blocks that the teacher, similar to other specialists we have that go between different buildings, and the other ESOL teacher who covers 3 buildings, they would have blocks at one school, travel to the other, and have blocks at that school.
Yeah, so we would be working with the building administration to look at the scheduling to determine times, of times of service, time of day that students would be pulled to receive their services.
I just have a question about the meeting the policy and the LAO things. I don't have it all in front of me, so I apologize. But I feel like there was something I read that said that they were the multilingual learners needed 2 periods of instruction per day.
So it's all based on the factors of what they're scoring, their developmental level. This is all part of the LAO plan as well. Not every student needs to receive 2 hours every day of a direct service.
Okay, I guess like a period doesn't necessarily mean an hour, I guess, but I'm just curious, like how is that translated with the different scheduling at, say, the different schools? So like if there's somebody in the middle school that, needs more, and I guess I'm not going to come up with a great example, but it's just kind of, it seems like it might be really tricky, and I guess I just want to be 100% sure that we are meeting all of the need that is out there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We are able to meet the needs of all of our students who we currently have with 2 teachers next year.
Yep. Sorry, one more question. I was just going to ask how many, because you're saying on these number counts it was not including the ones who are on monitor or exit, and you were saying approximately there's 15 at the high school next year and 4 at the middle school that will share one teacher. How many additional are going to be either monitored or exited would be added to that load?
Sure. So next year at the middle school, we have students that are very close to being proficient. So the number at the middle school next year could actually go down potentially to 2 students requiring ML services. And at the high school next year, we also have several students who are scoring very high, or who scored very high last year on the access, who might be at their proficiency level this year. So the numbers next year could actually be much less than 15.
But there's already some on monitor, right?
Yes.
That's what
that was the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On that monitor and exit.
Yes, we have. There's 1 student next year on monitor at the high school.
Kelly.
And remind us again when those scores will come out so that we will have more concrete information.
We should have them in May. Yep.
Kara.
Yeah, follow-up question about the monitoring support that's needed. It looks like there are a couple of paragraphs in the LAO plan that talk about the monitoring needs, and that they're numerous. It looks like that there's still quite a bit of guidance that's needed when they're on monitor status.
So when a student is on monitor status, the teachers are checking in with other staff. They're making sure that the student is still succeeding, If at any time there's a lot of regression, then they can go back and implement the service that they had last received. But there's no direct service involved in that.
Okay, I mean, it looks like more based on this, and I'd be curious to hear more from the teachers around that. So I guess I'm wondering why that number is not included. The monitoring number isn't included in the overall numbers.
Because it's not a direct service, they're not directly being taught by the teacher.
But there's an expectation that they're providing, that there is time involved in what they're doing in the monitoring. It's just not face to face with the kids.
It's not face to face. It's really having a conversation with the teacher. How's, the student doing?
And so one at the high school, and what are the on monitor status at the other schools?
So let's see. We don't have any information for Moore Street for any students being on monitor next year.
Are there direct services? We had the 15 and the 4, but I didn't hear what the.
So at Moore Street for next year, there's 9 students.
And none on monitor?
None on monitor.
Okay.
Nope. At Mast Landing, we have 1 student on monitor.
And no direct services?
And 8.
Oh, 8. Okay.
Yep. At the middle school, we have 5 students on monitor and 4 students. And then at the high school, we have 15 direct service and 1 student that we know of now on monitor.
Right.
Yeah, because again, the monitor numbers could change based on the scores that we receive in May.
And Durham?
There's 1 student in Durham. And 1 on monitor.
So 1 and 1. And Pownal had none either?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Kelly?
And just so I'm clear, the amount of work required for monitoring students is considered fairly minimal?
Yes.
I just had a quick question. So, how do you determine, when a student is, kind of proficient?
So when they reach a composite score of 4.5 on their testing, on their WIDA testing.
And that's once a year?
Yeah.
Kara?
Can you tell us more about what that looks like to reach a score of 5? Does that mean that they can then follow all the lessons in their classes and they can have conversations with their peers and
yeah, they're considered proficient across all levels,
including socially and
yes. Yep.
I was wondering, just for my quick math, it looks like there's no thought that there will be any addition to MLL students, like at the pre-K level or say at the kindergarten level, or
based on the information we have now, no.
Thank you for this information. How are the 3 positions divided up now in terms of which students they work with at which schools?
So we have 1 person that's solely at the high school, and our other 2 are split between buildings. I don't have the information as to which buildings that they're split between, but they do split. They split the other buildings.
Okay, and the proposed position. So I'm guess maybe this is a question for Jean. If when we have a proposed reduction going from 3 to 2, correct? How is the decision made which position gets eliminated? Which person? Right.
And it's always that, and I just want to say, in terms of when we're talking reduction in any of position staff, we know that we're talking positions, but we also know there are faces behind those positions. So what we would do is we follow the contract. And in a case, for example, I'll use an elementary case. We have lots of elementary folks across the district, and there are lots of, because there's a larger group of folks, sometimes those folks move on, they retire or resign, as you heard tonight. So oftentimes there's a shuffle there, but what we would do in the case, in any case, is we look at the area of impact they're in. And what happens in this particular case, that we have 3 teachers, so we look at what the contract says, and you're looking at who is on, in terms of, we look at how long they've been in the district, we look at their education, and that's how that's determined directly by what the contract reads.
Currently, this year, you have 1 full-time at the high school. How many students does that person support?
I don't have that information on me right now. I prepared for next year.
In terms of the certification for an ESOL teacher, what is that like? Could you talk about that in terms of, is it just across all grade levels when you get certified? It's K through 12?
I'm not exactly sure of the certification process, or I know there's a certification. I don't know if it's across all grade levels or what the schooling entails.
Okay, I guess I'm just asking because we have a teacher at the high school, and so I guess I'm thinking that if the positions were to be shuffled around, it could be teachers working with different populations, and I was wondering about the skills and the certification.
We do have an ESLO teacher who has worked with across grade levels when we just had the 1 teacher here.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about this year? How much time do our multilingual learners not have access to an ESOL teacher at the high school? And then next year, what would that look like if we eliminate that position? How many days or how much time would these students not have access to an ESOL teacher?
So I would anticipate, so this year we have a full-time teacher here. So I would say that at any time, unless the teacher's busy, students would have access. Next year, I would expect that we would have a teacher here daily as well, not full days, because they would have to split some time. But students would have access to a teacher every day.
Do you know how much it is in the budget that we're moving for that position?
$102,000.
102.
Sorry, I turned my mic off. The 102,000 includes benefits, salary, sort of the whole cost of an employee. And I did see from the back that the certification for the ESOL from Cynthia is K-12. So. Danielle.
I have a question in regards to the policy that we have, and it talks about having a district language assessment committee. And I'm wondering, do we have such a committee? It says that this committee is encompassed of not only the teachers and students, but some parents, and they go over like things that are going to be done. And I'm just wondering if we have that, and have they had some thoughts about eliminating one of the teachers?
So we have not met as a committee. So we haven't had that discussion as a committee.
Does the committee exist?
I haven't been part of a committee.
Okay.
So I would say yes, the committee does exist. But I haven't been part of that committee this year.
Okay. So then my follow-up is, do we also have the school language assessment committee?
I would have the same answer to that. I have not been a part of a committee this year.
And that's in the LAU? That's where you're seeing that?
Yes.
That might be a helpful document for us all to have for our next discussion about.
And can I just make, I know you had we had someone provide some documentation with the LAU plan in it. I will say, we'll make what we'll do for you next time. The policy was updated. I just want to make sure you have the current one. and it was adopted in 2023. We'll just make sure you have the most recent one. It's also for anyone looking for it. It's on the website as well. It's just the board had updated. I just want to make sure everyone has the same document they're looking from.
And if I recall, it's a rather lengthy document. I don't think we need the whole thing. I think we're just looking for the part that speaks to this piece, right? Because there's more. Is it just this? No? Okay. Okay. Maybe I'm thinking of another document that sometimes Cynthia brings in that's this big.
Oh, it's not that big one.
Okay. Wrong one. Okay.
It's 6 pages.
Oh, I can handle 6 pages. Thank you. Okay. Yep.
If I'm reading it correctly, it is saying that the language assessment the school language assessment committee is to recommend modification of ESOL support services or reclassification of multilingual learners. So I think it's great questions from Danielle about those two committees, and that it should be these should be committee discussions. And so I would like to see if that's something that could happen, is this policy being more closely followed.
Yeah, Alicia, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and also just acknowledge the place that you and Jean and the other administrators are in terms of having to look hard at these numbers and make recommendations around it. I think my question may be for somewhere between you and Jean. I think I'm sensitive to the question surrounding how, with two teachers, we would be able to meet our requirements under law to the students that are in our care. I think where I find myself is just struggling a little bit to, as I have with some of other conversations around in this area, in terms of support for students, is just how, particularly with a population like the ESOL population, where these are students that are potentially at a vulnerable population, of just how to understand where sticking to the letter of the law on what we need to provide, and when recognizing the benefit to these young people of having the additional support. And I guess I'm using the word additional, I mean, I guess above what is required by law. I guess I'm just asking how do you propose that the board balance those concerns? Because I think as we've heard from some of the folks tonight and also some other folks who are communicating with the board, there's a feeling of in the current structure that there is great support, right? That there's a sort of feeling of feeling seen and feeling like the services are what we're required to give, but also more than that, and that we're preparing them really well. And so, hearing that our current setup serves our students really well is wonderful, right? That's a wonderful email to get. We don't get that email every day. So then thinking about what happens when we reduce that, of then thinking about our inability to provide the same structure. So I guess I'm just asking, again, either of you, if you have thoughts on just how we can consider balancing those two needs.
So again, we certainly want to make sure that we're providing what students need for support. And we do have a great team, and they've all gone above and beyond. And the scores that we have shown that. Really, we really need more data from this year's testing to determine what level of support and what level of service and need that students are going to have before I can be very specific around this is how much time we're going to be in this building, or this is how much time. So we won't have that information until May. But certainly with the numbers that we have and the level of service and need that the students currently have and receive based on last year's scores, we can certainly make it work with 2 teachers.
And That's always that's a great question, Colin, on that. In terms of the letter of the law with two teachers, do I believe you could to the letter of the law? Yes, I do believe you could with two teachers. I think, but here's this other conundrum when you hear, certainly there's this other piece as well, and that's what you're talking about, that how do you wrestle with, yes, is what we have to do by law, just like we would for special education. Kids have an individual education plan, and they have so many service hours on that plan. But then you're looking at, there are some of those untangible things, those in the moment things that are harder to measure, or those certainly, we saw our great, our great high school kids here tonight to show love and support for their teacher, who also loves and support them. Those are those things that are just not tangible. We see it, we feel it. But in terms of letter of the law, yes, we can meet the letter of the law, but it's that other part that we have to wrestle with. And, and we're looking at, this is a really, really tough budget time for us. And we have to, figure out, making our best decisions possible for our kids, to make sure that we're meeting those needs. And still, that's, we get back to, I was glad to see Maddie stand up and say, people get out, we got to support our budget. Looking now where we're at, even with our reductions, I worry because we lost so much subsidy. I really worry, even with the great support that we have, how far is enough? And that's a really difficult question for the board to wrestle with, because I think there are so many, and this in particular, there are a lot of, it's those things that are not so tangible. It's not, we certainly were doing wonderful WIDA scores, but there are those other pieces that are tough.
Moon.
I just had a quick question, kind of about like the students, like kind of like mental and like emotional well-being, kind of like by like removing this third teacher, as like some people stated, like Miss Highland is like a great teacher, and I already know Miss Highland, but it's just kind of like wondering about how like removing this teacher will like affect their emotional and like mental well-being, as like the students and teachers already have like a deep connection with each other with how much time they spend together. I'm just wondering, like, by removing them, like, will this like negatively impact them some way, shape, or form?
I think potentially, I think it's hard to say with any student who has a strong connection with a teacher, when that teacher is no longer, within the district or within the school, there is a sense of loss.
So we've given a lot of focus in this discussion on the impact to the high school. Remind me, in the middle school, how many students we had last year? We're going down to 4 and possibly less than 4 next year. I'm just kind of curious about what support has looked like for those students in the middle school who haven't necessarily had access to one full-time teacher for their entire day.
Right. So I don't have access. I only did the numbers for next year, so I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can get them to you for this year's population. But I will say...
Can I make a recommendation too? Because I know there are questions around that, and I think that's really, really important questions. So I think like we did with the class size, that the board asked, we'd like to see that for the elementary, that, we'll have Alicia pull that data together for what it looks like this year with the number of students, and also where the teachers are, if that's helpful for the board. And I think it's, and again, I'm a visual person myself, so I think seeing it would be really helpful, and we can provide that for next time.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. But I will say, based on scores from last year, the students that we have next year at the high school are all almost at proficient. So not having a full-time teacher within the middle school hasn't seemed to have impacted those students negatively. They're all making great progress.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, just sort of the visual piece of what the support has looked like at the schools to date. I appreciated the teacher who got up and spoke that, one person covering 6 schools was not ideal or tenable, which I can understand, learning more about how these programs work. But I'm also interested in seeing, with 15 at the high school and 22, I guess, across the other schools, how does that break up with 3? Right? Do we have an ESOL teacher that has a caseload of 9 and 9 and, or 10 and 10 and 15? I'm torn because I do think there's, it sounds like we have some really great best practices that are working well, but in the scope of the whole thing, I don't know how that works with the numbers that we have. Yeah, I guess I would just like to see maybe some potential breakdowns of what those might look like, understanding that we won't really know until, we know what those scores are in May, but we knew where they were. So we have a good sense of kind of where they are on that continuum, on what what a breakdown of 2 teachers might look like across 5 schools and what a breakdown of 3 teachers might look like across 5 schools. And I also appreciated the idea of, is there another way? Is there a creative alternative solution we can look at to maintain the people that we have, but also address the very real, tax impact that we're looking at early on in the meeting of, almost 8% in some places. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to flag, I guess, to all to all involved, that I guess I'm just reflecting on that just amongst the presentations tonight from Julie and Julie number 2, that Steve, sorry, that some of the way in which we were talking, those administrators were talking about the impact of the reductions, felt to me, and y'all can throw something at me if I'm really misspeaking. You can always throw something at me. It felt very much that we were talking qualitatively about the impact of saying of the difference between 12 and 16 or between 16 and 18 is really hyper it's like almost ecological in terms of like the relationship between the teacher and the students and the particular students in that realm. I guess I just wanted to flag that I'm feeling in the way that and I understand why, but I feel like in the presentation of the sort of rationale behind these cuts, or this recommended cut, this feels like a really quantitative argument, and just to note that difference, not that one is right and one is wrong, but just that there's a difference, and that if we're I don't know. I guess I'm saying that as much to my colleagues on the board of just how do we balance that understanding of saying we hear a rationale given to us by Emily and Julie that talks about this sort of ecological understanding of who the students are and how they relate to the teachers and who the teaching staff is and how flexible they can be, and then what seems like a very by the numbers kind of quantitative question of what we're required to do. That just feels a little dissonant to me.
All these hands up over here. We'll start with Maura. We'll move around.
I also have a question in my mind. In addition to the impact that we've talked about on the students, we had heard from some folks about the professional development available to the teachers. And I'm wondering if that would be lost, and it sounds like it has been really valuable. And I guess I'm wondering about that too. Was that something that it sounds like that was something that was new, that wasn't in place previously, and what would be the plan going forward to make sure that wasn't lost? Sure, yeah. I'm assuming we don't have a professional development plan in place for next year yet. Right.
Yeah, I appreciate your your point, Colin. And I also really appreciate everyone who sent us emails and everyone who's here tonight. I'm concerned about this recommendation, that it goes against our goals of providing equitable education and fostering a culture of inclusion and belonging. And I think there was someone that spoke about the welcoming aspect of having someone, a full-time person here at the high school. And there's welcoming, there's also belonging. And I think there's a lot of work and time that needs to go into relationship building with students that really makes them truly believe that they belong, not just that they're welcome, but that they actually belong. And I think that eliminating the position sends a message that I'm not comfortable sending on the board, that these students don't deserve this, especially in a time when these students and families are getting a pretty consistent message in our culture that they don't belong or that they don't matter. And I would really like to see our district take steps to bring more multilingual learners into our district, and as opposed to driving them away. And I'd like to see how else we could make up the money for that, since I hear that real concern as well.
Yeah. Cheyenne.
And as a board, our duty is to look after the students, right? And so getting rid of this position, that doesn't really match that, right? These students need this position. They need this teacher to lean on. And if we get rid of that, what are we doing?
It's a challenge. I mean,
is it budget? Is that what our main concern is?
So there's a couple of things that we're responsible for. One of those things is to pass a budget. And, if we argue that any cut is counter to our goal of supporting kids, then we are looking at much bigger increases, and we run a very real risk of not passing the budget. I love that Maddie will vote for our budget every year. I don't think she's in the majority in that stance. I hope she is, but so it is a balance, right? I mean, we have to weigh all the different pieces, because we are not supporting our kids if we put a budget out there that we can't then pass, right? That creates even more chaos. So we need to balance and weigh all of the pieces, and with the, meet our goals, obviously start with the needs, and then we have aspirational goals that we're trying to meet. I'm not convinced that this would be the best place to cut a position, right? Maybe there's another way, to that qualitative versus quantitative point. But I think we also might owe some grace to the administration who made this recommendation, knowing the data, knowing that the majority of the children we have that we're servicing are on that cusp of proficiency. Now, does that mean they don't need services? Absolutely not. But I'm listening to what Kara's saying about belonging and welcoming, and we have 4 other schools that don't have a full-time person. We want those children to feel welcome too, right? So we need to find a way that is sustainable, that meets the needs, but also is, we can get it done. Kelly.
Yeah, I definitely want to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our MLL students. And I guess maybe it would be helpful for me to hear more details about how this reduction would actually impact all of the areas that people are concerned about, the actual schedules, the one-on-ones, whatever it is that you think could be potentially impacted by this reduction.
I agree. I think that would help understand, I was happy to hear that even in the 2-teacher model that there would be someone in the high school every day, right? Like, I see that as a huge gap if we have a school that has no support at all on any given day. I don't know if we have that at the other schools, but that seems like that would be concerning to me if it was like, on Tuesdays there's just nobody here. But I think, to your point, understanding what it might look like might help us understand, like, that just doesn't work for who we want to be, and we'll find another way to make up that $102,000. Beth.
Maybe this is a question for when we deliberate, but
These are all questions.
Okay, I know. I was like, I don't know,
but we
this.
have Alicia here, so we want to have.
Yeah. I guess it's not really a question for Alicia. I guess it's more for Kelly. If what kind of, because we just got our impact Kelly Wentworth. Sorry, we just got our impact to the towns and whatnot, and so if just like as something that we could look at for comparison value, what would it impact if we added the 102 back in for this position? So I'd like to see that.
That's a good point, Beth. We're not here to deliberate tonight. We're here to listen to the different parts and ask our clarifying questions. Are there other questions, not that we won't have another opportunity, but any other questions that folks have tonight for Alicia before we carry on with our next? No? Okay. Thank you. All right. Infrastructure planning. Jean.
Okay, we're going to provide the board with a lot of data this evening about sort of what we're looking at for our infrastructure needs. The finance and facilities and operations committees have had a couple of joint meetings, so they've seen a lot of this information in detail. So we give you a lot of information this evening, and we do have some of our administrators, departments heads who are in really help to develop these plans present if we get stuck with any questions tonight. So there are three areas that we need to address in our infrastructure. One is vehicles and grounds equipment replacement. So we've developed a plan to update our aging fleet. We're looking at what are those really useful life recommendations. We're also looking at the energy audit phases. If as you recall, we had EMC that completed an energy audit for our district, and they made some recommendations on things that we need to do to be more efficient. And another chunk of life safety projects. And that's where we're really looking, how do we address student and staff safety by further securing our buildings, increasing communication, and expanding visibility within and around our buildings. So we're going to talk about these three separate buckets tonight. So we're going to start with looking at vehicles and grounds. So there are a couple of areas in here. First of all, we're going to share some information about how do we update our student transportation vehicles. As you can imagine, we run the wheels off our buses and vans. We also have some facilities, grounds maintenance vehicles. That's everything from trucks. There's a maintenance van, our tractors, our mowers, utility vehicles, and other very small equipment things that we need to maintain our facilities, our grounds, and our sports fields. Let's talk about transportation vehicles first. Let's talk about buses. So we looked at, what we did is we did a thorough inventory of the year of our buses, how many of those we have of that particular year, and the average mile on our buses. And you look at the bottom, we do have a 2026, and yes, it really is a 2026, not a 2025. We have confirmation. You think it's really a 26. It doesn't have any miles on it at this count. But if you look at it, we have some really old buses all the way back to 2012, and the average mile is over 149,000 miles on it. So you can look through there, and we have a bunch that to 2019 era that have over 100,000 on them, and so forth down the line. And we're looking at vans, because we also transport a lot of kids in vans for a variety of reasons. What we did here, we did the number of vans again by year, and also looking at the average miles on those. And again, I'll say our vans are very well loved and used very often. And you look at, for example, we have two 2014 vans, and their average mile is 169,300. Which is a lot of miles when we're transporting kids. Our total fleet, we have 22 school buses and 11 passenger vans. And on average, buses have a 10-year cycle and life cycle, and we should be replacing about 2 every year to keep our fleet up to date. Vans have a 6 to 7 year life cycle. You can, if you have a vehicle of your own, a van, you know that it's lucky we last that long, and we should be replacing 2 every year as well, and that's what our plan is for that. When we're looking at our grounds and maintenance vehicle, that's where we put in we have a dump truck, a couple other trucks, and a van that we use specifically for maintenance. We have one of each one of those, all the way back from a 2011. Our most recent, our van is a 2020. So of those 4 vehicles, they have a 6 to 7 year life cycle, and we should replace one of those a year. We have lots of other little equipment. For example, the gator you'll see driving around on the football field. We got mowers and tractors and trailers and all sorts of other things. These are the years on the side. But when you look at instead of saying average miles, we say average hours. So it's not, for example, average miles on the gator. It's the average hours that we're looking at the lifespan. Generally, mowers and tractors have a 10 to 20 year life cycle, and we should replace 1 a year so that we keep up with that. So the recommendation that we have for replacement plan is to use a 3-year term leasing purchasing for 3 years. Year 4 and beyond, we would be able to purchase replacement vehicles as part of our annual budget, so you wouldn't have that interest that accrues. What we're recommending is use undesignated fund balance as an offset so we can incrementally step into a consistent annual appropriation. And then we would present the plan annually to the board for consideration. And that's where you saw that $168,000 that was that we said we had on both the expenditure side and revenue side. That's the offset there. That's our recommendation to use that. So it would not be an increase to the local budget. And that's on the next slide. We will say add that 168 and offset it. So we're looking at a 3-year lease purchase, which would for next year, which would give us 2 buses, 2 vans, a truck, mower, tractor, and then other miscellaneous field maintenance equipment. But I will say that this is not an additional 168 to the budget because we're offsetting it with undesignated. When we look at the energy audit, we have lots and lots of information from EMC, who did our energy audit, and they have a 4-year phase-in plan. We have a recommendation that we're going to look at phase 1 only for next year, but I want to explain a little bit about what that looks like for each year. This planning will allow our district to address the capital needs that were identified. So phase 1, and that's actually a lease purchase payment, and it would be $303,095 a year, and this is what it would get us. So the high school needs some heating plan improvements. We need building automation upgrades at both the high school and the middle school. There's district-wide building automation. There's an integration plan for the high school and middle school. There's miscellaneous exterior weatherization needed at the high school. And the biggest chunk of that is LED lighting upgrades at all the schools, including the central office. And the hope with that is, as you know, is if we do LED upgrades, that there may be some on the other end, there may be some savings on the other end that we could hopefully see. And then Pownal does need some ceiling tile replacements as well. That would be the first phase. Phase 2 later on, and again, we would every year present this to the board. Phase 2 would be air handler replacements at the high school, middle school, Mast Landing, and Pownal. Terminal equipment at the high school, middle school, and Mast Landing. Mechanical installation at the high school, Mast Landing, Moore Street, and Pownal. Building automation upgrades, Mast Landing, Moore Street, Pownal, Durham, and the central office. District-wide building automation integration, Mast Landing, Moore Street, Pownal, Durham, and central office. Attic insulation and air sealing at Pownal. Miscellaneous exterior weatherization at Freeport Middle, Mast Landing, Moore Street, Pownal, and the central office. We need some window improvements at Mast Landing and Moore Street. Testing and balancing at basically all of our buildings, and as well as duct air leak testing, and then a building generator at the high school. When we go into year 3, we'd be looking at air handler replacements, terminal equipment, roofing, heat pumps, ADA compliant bathrooms, electrical panel replacements, exterior restoration, walk-in cooler freezer at 2 of our schools, a building generator at the middle school. We need some exterior restoration at Pownal, and asphalt paving at 5 of our schools. The final phase, phase 4, we'd be looking at domestic water heating upgrades, air handler replacement, walk-in cooler freezer at Durham, and we need some building generators at Moore Street, Pownal, and Durham. So that's the whole big picture of all those things that were identified through the energy audit. So our recommendation is to use a 17-year term leasing purchase for 4 phases, and to use undesignated fund balance as an offset against, we can incrementally step into a consistent annual appropriation. And it would be presented for all those phases. Whatever we're going to do would come back to the board and be presented annually. For next year, what we're recommending for the budget is to approve phase 1, all those things listed at the beginning, and enter into a lease purchase agreement. The first payment would not be due until the 26-27 school year. That's how that works. So we recommend getting started on these projects, and then in 26-27, that's when you start your first payment. So we need to know that we have approval before we did that, because it would, future budgets, it would impact. But all things that need to be done in our schools. The third bucket we're looking at tonight, and I would say probably the most important, that also ties in with our vehicles, and we're talking about keeping kids safe, keeping staff safe, is what we're calling life safety. This addresses our student and staff safety by further securing our buildings, increasing communication in our buildings, and also expanding visibility within and around the buildings. We're recommending doing this in a single phase. In our estimates, it would cost $2,434,376. What that would looks like: cameras at our schools, door access, phones, paging, AEDs, door replacements, fire access, and devices. And our recommendation for this, so it doesn't impact the budget, is to use undesignated fund balance to complete projects outside of the local FY26 budget. And then again, that's our for next year, is make a one-time transfer from undesignated fund to capital reserve account. And then we can do all those projects which need to be done. We'll look at sort of, here's their funding proposal for the 25-26 budget. As I mentioned before, there's $168,000. That's for the vehicle equipment replacement. Your energy audit won't cost anything. Your life safety would be the $2.4 million, for a total of use of undesignated fund $2,602,376. And to have a picture of what we have now, what we anticipate of having, what's allowable and what would be left. So the unaudited 23-24 undesignated fund balance is $6,710,182. That's the unaudited. And we allocate it for 24-25. If you remember, we allocated $900,000, and we also transferred $1,334,500 to all those reserve accounts that we created. For example, you heard tonight Emily mentioned a teacher that was added in reserve account to Mast Landing, and Alicia mentioned a special ed teacher that was added. Those are through the reserve accounts. We're estimating at the end of the year, we're estimating approximately $1,175,000 that will be expended that will be added towards that amount to give us an ending balance of $5,650,682. That's our estimated. Our allowable, as you know, 24, 25, you can have 5% is allowable. So that what's allowable by the state would be $2,075,023. So then we looked at, so how much if we have this 5.6 that we're anticipated having, and we're allowed to have $2,075,000, then how much do we have extra? And that's where you see the $3,575,689. So we're looking again, ending. That's where we found the estimated unallocated. We just carried that number over the 5.6. This is what we're proposing. We're proposing the $900,000 towards the local budget, plus 75 to the high school tennis court and track field reserve. That's the amount that we've put in for the last several years to build up that reserve account. We're recommending $168,000 for vehicle replacement, and then the $2.4 million that's the life safety we're recommending to use to take care of these things for our kids and our staff. So our estimated, when you take that all out, after the budget process, would still be $2,073,306. That's what you would have left. And if you look back, what we said was the allowable amount? It was $2,075,023. So you're right at that sweet spot for what you should have in the bank. So we'll take that's a lot of information to digest, lots and lots. And we can take some questions now. The other thing we can do as well is you really have time to digest. Are there additional questions you'd like us to look a little more deeply, and you can let us know, and we can address that as well. Because it'll be important for my team to look at what the board is thinking, because if we're going to change any of anything, especially when we're looking at the energy audit, that would require some work for us to go back to EMC and look at that as well. I don't know if the board has any questions for our team at this time.
Kara.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can explain that allowable balance again. And
That's from the Department of Education. That's what they're saying that we should have for a fund balance. You're up to 5%. Remember, during COVID, it went up to 9% for a while, and it's dropping back down, and it used to be 3%.
So
yes, so
and
it's
the ending balance after last year's budget process was $5.6 million. Was that?
I couldn't hear what you said, Kara.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the ending balance. Oh, never mind.
Which line would you like me to
Never
look
mind.
at? Yeah. Okay.
The equity audit. All the recommendations from the equity
energy audit.
Energy. Thank you.
Yeah. Different audit.
Are all of the recommendations they made in here, or are there some that they made that we did not include?
So what we did is we grouped things that were alike, so they're all there. But however, there were some things that we've already done. For example, the freezer cooler at the middle school was in there, but we've done is we took it out. So anything we've already done, we took out, but everything else is in there.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, some things under the life safety bucket were things that were identified through the equity. Now you got me doing it. The energy audit.
Yes.
So those were sort of changed buckets, but they were identified in that
So
audit.
some were either we've done it or we moved it to life safety, but it's everything they identified is there. Plus other things. Our team went out. Actually, they went like every school, every door, looked everywhere to make sure that was captured in there as well for that life safety piece.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Jean, for all this information, and everyone for all the hard work that you did. I know it was a lot of work for the facilities committee to look through all of this, so thank you. I'm wondering about our capital plan, if we still have one, and how this fits into that, and if this is our facilities presentation, or if we're getting a separate one of those.
So there's going to be a separate facilities presentation, and Glenn will present as well on the local side. What are those? Because this isn't. I'll tell you what. This isn't everything we need to do, as you can imagine. There are other things as well. So we're also looking at what are those other things we do, and those are funded through the regular budget. Okay. And Glenn will present. He'll tell you what those projects are.
Okay, and then when we have the reserve account for those projects, that's what that's for.
It's that's actually in the local. Glenn's going to say what's in the local for capital, and then we'll have more details about for the capital reserve account. And the big one in there right now, that's still the money that's still sitting there, is for the Pownal septic. We're actually ready to go out for bid for that so that they can break ground on that in June.
Okay.
So that's out of the capital reserve.
Okay. And so do we still have a capital plan where we're looking ahead, what we need for the next 5 years, 10 years, and where this fits into that?
Yeah. I think this is it for that part, but there are those other projects that we just have to do to keep up in our buildings, some bigger maintenance projects, but for the big pieces, this is it, which is really driven by the energy audit and those other identified needs in life safety.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Any other information, folks? Yep.
Thanks so much for this, Jane, and it is a lot, but it's also quite clear. So thank you to you and everybody else who pulled this together. My understanding is that I checked it with Malik because she's the smart one. Is that the phase one? What we'd be committing ourselves to is the 303,000 starting next.
The following, not this budget.
Year.
The following, in for 17 years.
I mean, we had a conversation a bit about this. I guess last year's budget in terms of how we kind of understand a decision we're making this year impacting how much flexibility we have coming down the pike. I guess my question is just how much are you estimating that $303,000 is going to become something that really we have to then build a very creative budget around? Because we'd be locking ourselves into it.
That you're absolutely right. You're committing. That's why we have to be really clear. It's not this year's budget, but it's future budgets. It is a way for the district to do the projects that we desperately need to do. These are things we really need to do in a more affordable way. And I look at some of the things that we've had to do this year that we had to make sure we had money for to cover. This would allow these things less. I think of less surprises going on. And the other nice thing about the phase plan, let's say for example, if we have a walk-in freezer cooler that's way out, I was like, holy cow, that thing is about to die. We're going to shuffle it to another phase. So we have the options for that after the year one. But it does commit you this is what we're going to do. But I always say it's sometimes it's nice to know, because the knowns are good, because then we know we've got to have that for that. So it'll always be that amount for that amount of time. Just like when we do lease our buses like we do now, we know what that amount is.
And I think, I don't know if Kelly has a plan to share sort of the funding strategy around this, but there's the next step, which is how do we put these into the budget without tanking everything else we want to do. I don't know if that was planned for tonight or another day or.
So we weren't really sure how we were going to work that full plan that was presented to the Facilities and Finance Committee because really what we did with that full group was I projected out on the sheet the full, it goes beyond 10 years, but what I presented to them was 10 years. And really we looked at implementing, and that's how with the vehicle replacement we came up with using the 3-year leases for 3 years in a row, and then and then in that 4th year, by that point, by using undesignated fund balance to help assist with kind of stepping into the 400,000, as you saw, that is really the true total cost. So we'll work at how we can present the full kind of step in phased process. It doesn't affect what we wanted to present tonight is what affects 25, 26, right? But if there's a larger picture that I presented to the two committees, to the joint committee, that actually shows us how we can incrementally step into this by utilizing our undesignated fund balance for the kind of these one-time purchases, which will help stabilize that undesignated fund balance. Because as you know, in a typical year, we don't spend our budget down to zero, thankfully, because nobody wants to be wearing orange when we're done if we go in the opposite direction. So there's always a little bit that gets added into fund balance annually. And so what we've done is kind of worked out a plan that we feel is sustainable over the next at least 4-year period that helps us step into all of these projects. So we'll figure out how to put it on a PowerPoint, which is a little harder, but maybe we'll just do a handout and then have to speak to it, because it's not, I don't know how I'm gonna like put it into a PowerPoint that if you're not here and looking at all the components, you're really gonna understand, which is why we didn't include it tonight, because this is the 25-26 kind of like budget rollout. So we didn't want to, and this was enough data. We kind of felt like it was enough data to digest tonight, but there is a thought out plan for how we would step into this without seeing a major spike in the budgets. But it does include us committing to about $295,000 a year. You're talking about future budgets, Colin, right? We would be adding $295,000 a year by committing to these things, but by utilizing fund balance, we level that out for 4 years to step into all of those payments. So we incrementally take that on as a taxpayer.
Kelly.
And as I recall, this first $303,000 does not actually include any potential rebates that we may get from the LED lighting, correct? Correct.
Because we do not know if they will be available by the time the projects are complete. We are hoping they will be.
But we're hopeful that this number may actually be less than 303 for the first year at least.
Correct.
And just to point out, secondly, that at least three of these projects on this first phase are going to impact us in other areas of our budget, such as our energy usage.
Like savings.
Savings, yes. So.
Which I don't think we've built in, because we don't know what they would be.
We have, because we don't know what we're truly going to recognize for savings. So what we would want to do is look at a pattern. I'm the advocate of looking at like kind of a 3-year average and seeing where we're at, because of the, one year you have a great heating, like a heating season's great and you save, it's not that cold out and you save money on heating oil, but then the next year it completely tanks. So, I'm really more of like looking at patterns and trying to have like a consistent average in your budget to utilize and not have the spikes and valleys.
Thank you, Kelly, for doing all of that and being creative about how we spread it out to mitigate the impact to the taxpayers. I was wondering if it would be possible to see the breakdown also by like building. Is that something that could easily be done? I'm thinking about.
Can I just ask? Are you talking dollar amount, or what is it?
I guess dollar amount and project. Yeah, I'm thinking about the age of our facilities. I'll ask my follow-up question. I'm thinking about the age of some of our facilities and whether there's been a conversation around, like, when is the tipping point where and I know we're coming up on our strategic plan, and this is a significant amount of money to be doing in upgrades to our facilities. And I'm wondering if there's been a conversation around that tipping point of putting more money into keeping our facilities updated, or if there's a conversation on the horizon about new schools.
And we have that broken, if you want to know, for life safety, we have that broken down by building and by what the item is as well. So we can do that by life safety, and you'd like to see that for the energy audit items as well?
Yeah, that would be great. And is that a conversation that is going on about the age of some of our facilities and the difficulty of continuing to update them? Is that a challenge that I guess the facilities? I guess that's a question for Glenn, isn't it? Maybe when I speak.
And I think it's but what's interesting. I can give you a snippet just because I have it in front of me for life safety. I'll do just the total for each building. because it's always interesting when we always talk like Durham's a new school. Well, Durham's been around for a while. So for life safety of that whole chunk, we're talking $224,535. That's for Durham, and I'm just talking life safety, not the other stuff. Moore Street is $364,088. Pownal's $327,694. Mast Landing's $487,943. The middle school's $404,128. The high school's $590,914, and the central office is $35,075. And those are that's by life safety, and I don't have that other data in front of me. Yeah, we'll have to dig in and do that, but that I just happen to have.
Other information people would like them to have on hand when we revisit this during our deliberations? Okay. All right. Thank you. This is the product of many, many months of work, and so thank you for that. I have lost my agenda again. Oh, here we go. Cynthia. Yeah. Oh. Okay, so we are at the item 13, new business. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval for the first read of the 2025-2026 school calendar? Cheyenne and Malik, thank you.
Okay. So item 13A is your gray handout in your purple folders. So I'm just going to highlight, can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm just going to highlight some of the changes that you'll see from this current year's calendar to this proposed calendar for FY26. I think if you remember that sometimes we start before Labor Day, sometimes we start after. This current year and the next year are the ones that we start after because of when Labor Day falls. Next year, or the following year, which I won't go into because I won't be here, but that year. The next year, the Labor Day would be on the 7th, so then you would want to start earlier, for example. So this stays the same for this proposed calendar as it is this current year. And then I'll just bring you to November. And if you see, as you can see, this year, because it was a presidential election, we chose to follow a line with Brunswick and 75 because it was one of those more, I'll just say it was an election that we just wanted to make sure that the kids were not in the schools. And so this coming year, this was discussed with the administrative team. Our administrative team wanted to pair it up because of Veterans Day falling on the 11th always, and it's a Tuesday. They wanted to put the PLD instead of Election Day, which would be the 4th. They wanted to put it on the 10th, so no students would come to school on the 10th and the 11th because that's a holiday. So there'd be back to back. So you don't have as many broken up weeks because we know those solid 5-day weeks are much more beneficial. So that's November. And then the other thing I want to point out is the winter vacation. So if you look at December, we have the 22nd through the 2nd, which is 10 days. This current year, we have 8 days. And I think the trickiest part is because of the way it falls. We had some discussion with, Brunswick and 75 and RC5. We had discussion around that, right? We were all willing to kind of look at it both ways. The administrative team here, we had a discussion back in December, I think it was, at one of our BT meetings around the pros and cons to the 10-day, to doing the 2 full weeks. If you look at this calendar,
I think we'll start with January, because you have January 1st falling on a Thursday. It's really awkward to come back for that one day for that whole week. So that was taken off the plate. And then, and that was across the other two districts as well, Brunswick and 75. So we all agreed on that. Then you go back to the 22nd and 23rd, and we had discussions both ways. Our administrative team felt that they felt stronger that it should be every once in a while you'll find a calendar like this, and then there are the 2 weeks, and you can kind of see it both ways. This is where we landed. This is where Brunswick landed as well. They brought this already once to their board as just a cursory look. They're in favor of the 2 weeks as well. So I knew that would probably be a discussion or something you were thinking about tonight. So that's December. And the winter vacation, and then I think that's all I wanted to highlight for you for the changes and the rationale, and so I can open it up to thoughts, questions. The end of year is always tricky because of Juneteenth now. That's always going to be a conundrum, right? And we never know the snow days, and so so far. Except for we know tomorrow, right? But our first one. But so far,
it's not bad to get to February for your first one.
We haven't had any. Yeah.
Maddie would like to know if we're getting rid of the vacation in February.
Oh my God! I have a whole night for you to come.
Sorry. She's here, so.
Not next year,
Yep. So you mentioned that. Okay, first I'm going to step back a second for Anna's benefit. The reason we are talking about this with Brunswick and 75, if you're not familiar, is because we all go to Region 10. We are required by law. I don't know,
yes.
by somebody
yes.
that we. Cynthia says so. That we can't be more than 5 days out of sync because. We don't want some kids from some districts not in Region 10 some days and versus others. So we all every year get together and coordinate our schedules as best we can to align them. I noticed you said Brunswick is approving 2 weeks. Is 75 not?
Let's see. This was the most. I thought this was going to be the easiest year. I was not thinking of that, and it was probably the most challenging of the 9 years in the discussion. They wanted to start originally before Labor Day, so we were 9 days off when the very first time we met. So we've, now we're all on the same page as for Labor Day, and I. 75, this is hard because you're not synced on the same days, right? And whoever gets the first vote, but we try to say, what are you thinking? Have you kind of floated this by your board and all of that? So Brunswick is solid, and we have shared that with 75, and so there's an awareness. Right now we're 2 days off from each other.
Which is within the 5. Or we're 2
great.
days.
Which
okay.
is great.
Okay, good.
Yes, 2 days. 2 days. Yes, not 7.
Not 2
we're
extra. Okay.
2
right.
only. Right. So it's the election day, and then.
Oh, so they were still keeping election day.
Yes, they are, because their situation is a little bit different with their schools.
With their schools. Okay.
So yeah.
Questions? Kara.
I may have asked this last year, but I forgot what you said. Why is there an early release day in February and not in the middle of the very long month of March?
I think I might defer to, we had one today. Today was the early release day. I think we have a PLD in March. So I think originally when we started, we were looking at, spacing them out, right? Because if we're going to look at student data, we want to have, and we don't always look at student data every single time. Like this March 14th this year, we're looking in the morning, we're going to be doing some work around the strategic plan, for an example. But in the afternoons, those schools may or may not, I don't know what their agendas are yet, be looking at student data. So there's points in the year. So it's spaced out so that you wouldn't have like 2 or 3 in 1 month. So it was really more about spreading them out. So we have that PLD. We always have a PLD day in March and in October. October, as you know, or if you were on the board, you know this, before this year, we always have, we belong to GC, the Greater Sebago Education Alliance, and so we coordinate together a team of us, work on the professional development day for the areas that are like PE, art, music, etc. All those, I think we're going to be putting pre-K in there this year and GATE this year, right? So we're trying to find those kind of solo type of, or more, you know, you only have 1 PE per building typically, except for the high school we have 3, but you know, you're trying to get the like people together in like the Cumberland County area so that they can bring in maybe professional development. Sometimes it's a teacher or 2 that are running the professional development. So that's really what we've done in October. So that's really kind of like that standard one that most 90% of the districts in Cumberland County keep. Once in a while, if like there's some initiative a district is working on, they may say we're not going to opt into that this year, and that happens. March, we've typically picked that day because Region 10 has had some professional development for their staff. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's in Massachusetts, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't talked to Sean about it. It was Nancy Weed before who I used to talk to about it, but so we've kind of kept that consistent for the benefit of Region 10, and we could move that one day or 1 week or another, but we've always just said, when is this? And we align with that date. So that's why those 2 are there. And then the early releases we put in different months than that. And I think May was chosen because we get our data, some of the data back to look at. I don't know if you want to add anything. I don't know if you, sorry. No, I don't want to put them on the spot, but why we spread it out. I mean, that is why we spread it out, but if they wanted to add, I was just going to.
Right, because the early release is another way to get professional development for the teachers without having a
Yes.
whole day without kids in school.
And Wednesdays were chosen, I'll just add this piece, Wednesdays were chosen because it can line up, like today. I don't know how many schools today had a staff meeting as well, or used it as a staff meeting day as well. So and forgive me the minutes because some schools get out at different times, but let's just say that the early release and the kids were, you know, they were starting at 1, right, on the early release day, 1 to the end of the school day, and they had scheduled a staff meeting. They could get another hour in it, so you could get a 3-hour I'm estimating the minutes, but a 3-hour chunk of time if you're working on something big in your school. So that's why we had picked the Wednesdays, in case you have that question as well.
I did, you know, it's funny. I had that same thought this week. I was like, okay, so we had a late start, a early release, and a no school snow day. That's what happens when you schedule things in February, unfortunately. But other questions on the schedule?
Just one question. I remember. It seems like our chronic absentee concerns have been. I mean, folks have been working on that. Kudos to all the administrators and everybody who works on that. But one of the concerns for that has been folks taking advantage of existing times in the schedule where they can then take additional vacation and pull their kids out. I'm just looking at that, like November 10 and 11. Was that considered at all? Sort of like how this, I guess a little early for skiing, but like, like
Yes, no.
you know, just like how tempting those two consecutive days would be for folks to start pulling out. Is that?
I would argue maybe, like this, these are all hypotheses, right? But I would argue that even if you had the day on the 10th, some people might still take the 2 days off, right? Long weekend. They would just do that anyway.
I see. So we're gambling either way. Okay.
Thanks, Cynthia. Could you remind me, did we used to have more early release days and then we pared that back?
Since I've been here, no.
Oh, okay.
We proposed it at one time many years ago, and
Oh,
it
okay.
was there was a big discussion around childcare, and it
Yeah.
ended up just not being sold. So we
Okay.
always have, when we've had them, we've always had the two,
Okay.
and then we spread them out.
Okay, great. Because I know we've
Yeah.
talked in the past about the impact to parents, and I'm forgetting. Do we offer anything? I know, I've seen the great ones at Wolf's Neck where they have like the 1-day camp or something. Do we
Mhm.
have anything like that on early release days?
I don't know if through community programs we have anything. Jean, do you know? I really just don't know
Yeah.
off the top of my head.
Peter could answer that. Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering
Yeah.
because that seems like maybe be helpful, but I think it's great that I'll tell Peter when we see him. It's great that they've offered those 1-day ones. Can I just ask one more question? Could I hear a little bit more about the decision around, because I know you said it could go either way on the 22nd, 23rd. And it'd be great maybe to even if the administrators wanted to weigh in or Jean about the thinking behind that. Because I'm already thinking like, I know my kids will be going to school on the 19th and that's the day before vacation now. So instead of that day being so instead of the 22nd and 23rd being like the fun last day before break, now it's the 19th and it just like creeped a little earlier. So I'm wondering about that aspect. And then if we were to go those 2 days or something, would that just come off the end of the year? Would that,
Yeah, it would. It would come off end of the year. What's tricky is not knowing what the other two, and technically it could create 4 different days. So if we, see what I mean? Yeah, if we went one of the days, we could probably work, like if we did the Monday, but then you'd have that same, or you could have that same conundrum of the January 2nd. Would somebody, right? You talk about the extending the vacation. So yes, we twirled all of what you're twirling now. We've twirled that.
And I think with the administrative team, part of it was really thinking that some staff members and families sometimes they want that long chunk during that week, and it's really tricky. And then so you say, well, then you go back for the 1 day, and it's just like that doesn't feel right either for people. And we said, do we do staff development that day? We thought, well, that might not be the best either. So that was a big discussion.
Thank
but the
you for-
consensus on the team.
Welcome.
okay, thank you for having that whole discussion.
All good questions. We have the same.
Other comments, questions? This comes for 2 reads?
It doesn't technically have to. It's been our practice. It's not a policy. So technically you could do it in one vote, but this gives you the opportunity to
think about it.
We just followed and we're bringing it next. So our policy on policies says that you have to have at least 2 weeks in between.
Yep.
This is not a policy, so it's coming back to you next Wednesday.
Can you just quickly review with us what the policy or procedure is around days when we don't take a full school day, how those impact our snow days at the end of the year?
No impact.
Yes, exactly.
It counted as a full school day.
And early
Also, if we
releases.
do like today, it counted as a full school day.
Yeah, as well as early releases. Like
Tomorrow
like
they're
today.
adding on the end. Yeah.
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 Right. If we feed them lunch, it counts as a day.
Okay.
Even if we give it to them on the way. No.
Any other questions, comments? We have a motion and a second. So all those in favor? Moon likes the 2 weeks. All right. We have no personnel. So we have another public comment. If we had anyone who would like to speak, we will.
Am I allowed to come again? As like the sole, person representing right now. So again, I'm Liz Pierce. I'm one of the 3 school counselors at Freeport High School. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of the thoughtful comments and questions regarding the presentation about the ESOL position at Freeport High School. And I just wanted to address a few things. You all had some questions, and
I was taking notes, and we do have a lot of the answers because we are here at the high school. The first thing, there was a lot of talk about a WIDA score of a 4.5 being proficient. And I think what's really important to understand is, although that might be proficient, I'm going to use quotes, it doesn't really provide enough information where students are capable of often accessing that complex language that they need at these high school classes that really are at that higher level language. So proficiency at a 4.5 might mean something legally, but I don't think it tells the whole story. And Colin, thank you for bringing up the qualitative versus quantitative. I think that really is an important debate on this whole topic. So we do support other students in our district who are proficient on their NWEA or their main through years tests that they take here. And they might be proficient, but we do provide them with a higher level of support. They go into a lot of our support classes even though they are technically proficient. So I just wanted to bring that up as a point that sometimes that score doesn't tell the whole story. Additionally, student numbers should not determine those services, as I've already said. We also need to consider that a number of multilingual learners next year also have IEPs. So at Moore Street, it is my understanding that 5 of our multilingual learners also additionally have IEPs. They are going to require a much higher level of support, not just through special ed, but at that multilingual level. And it is also my understanding that Freeport Middle, 2 of their 4 students also have IEPs. And my understanding is that there is 1 at Mast Landing. So there really is a higher level of need within that number of 37 that I think you all should be aware of. 30 minutes of instruction that is required under law or whatever was brought up before. That really is not enough for these students who are trying to go on to higher education. And so I just really want that to kind of be known. I do want to give a shout out to Moon for bringing up mental health. These students absolutely will be impacted by the loss of a position, I think just across the district. So this is more than just like the 1 position here, but I think our district does need the 3. I know there were a lot of numbers about past years. When we had 14 students to a half a position, I was here, I worked with that teacher, it did not work. When it was a 12-to-1 ratio, when we had 2 teachers with 24 students, that did not work. I know of examples of students here. We had 1 dropout of one of our multilingual learners, and I really think if we had had a program here, we might have been able to capture that student. We have another student who came into the high school who really had been here enough years that they should have been at a higher level. And we really believe it's because our program was not robust enough. So those numbers really do not tell that whole story. We know the ESOL certification is K-12. However, as you all know, students in elementary school and high school have very different needs, and the skill levels of those teachers really should be where their specialty lies. So really just, again, please think about the numbers in a different way. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that you will gather the information you need when you are moving forward with the budget and the recommendations for this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you for everyone who hung around for the whole meeting. Oh,
Just one. I'm the last one, I promise, and then everyone gets to go home. And really what I just wanted to say, my name is Jill Hyland. I'm the ESOL teacher at Freeport High School. I live in Brunswick, and I want to say thank you for your time, for your effort, and for everything that you put into this community, into this board, and these thoughts. I also want to invite you into our classrooms. I've spoken to the other 2 ESOL teachers in the district. They would like you to come to our classrooms, come to our schools, come to our meetings, come to our homes. Text us, email us, do whatever you need to do.
Don't do that, board members, please. I'm trying to keep them under control here.
Hey, we're open, we're open. Whatever you need, we want to provide that information for you. And we want to make sure that you have enough information to make a decision that lies in front of you. And again, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Jill. All right, I was just giving everybody a moment in case anyone was inspired. All right, then I would take a motion to adjourn. Kelly, Cheyenne, all those in favor? Thank you.